Listen to the sound of these mountain winds. They sing the songs of the bygone time. They have nourished life for generations. They have seen the emergence of man. Today, these peaks stand at the gates of a hazy future. We were completely dominated by the peak of Nanda Devi, lovingly called Nanda here. Since the very ancient times, she's been shaping the lives and values of these hill people. Life in these mountains can be tough. But the spirit of these people is as tall as the peak itself. And they live their life with all enthusiasm. Nanda Devi may be the prevalent spiritual force here, but interestingly, she doesn't need any elaborate ritual to please her. Not even an imposing shrine. She is the daughter of these villages, married to Shiva, the hermit king of Kailash. We witness the villagers dance to the song sung in her honor. This place has such a haunting topography, such a challenging terrain, that it has kept it almost virgin for centuries. It has kept the ravagers and the plunderers away. We were a part of a 3-camera unit, witnessing the spectacular wonders of Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve, the first biosphere reserve of the Himalayas. Our gut feeling was that we were in for something special. We had camped in 3 different villages, Raini, Lata and Dolma. These villages are at an average distance of 3 to 4 kilometers above the Joshimath Malari Road in Chamoli district. This region has a wide range of biodiversity and ecosystems. Along with the traditional Bhotia community, this region forms an ideal biosphere reserve. A biosphere reserve is more like a living laboratory, a natural museum, a place where man and nature coexist. They enrich one another, they gain from each other, they thrive together. Way back in the early 1970s, UNESCO had launched the famous Man and the Biosphere program. Several countries had come forward and joined hands. Today, there are more than 100 countries with 482 biosphere reserves all over the world. India alone has 14. Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve was special. We were informed that it was the 2nd oldest biosphere reserve in India. A typical biosphere reserve has 3 specific zones. There is a core area, untouched and protected, without any human habitation. Then there is the buffer zone. This zone is restricted, monitored and protected too. However, limited human habitations are allowed here with controlled human activity. The 3rd area is the transition area, which is habitable. Our camera units were in the buffer zone. The Bhotias are essentially of Indo-Mongoloid ethnic group. They rear cattle for milk and sheep for wool. They collect forest produce for wild edibles and medicinal herbs. We were to arrive at Tolma the next day. At 8,000 feet, the journey to Tolma village was breathtaking. But when we reached there, we were in for a surprise. The village was completely deserted, except for some children and some elderlies. We were told that this was the peak season for collection of an extremely rare, mysterious and exotic Himalayan herb called Yersa gumba. Many call it the herbal Viagra. Locally, they call it Kida ghas. It appears to be a symbiosis of a caterpillar and grass. There is a thriving black market for this forest produce. From another important place in the buffer zone called Malari, it finds its way into China, where it reportedly sells for 80,000 rupees a kilo. The authorities of the Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve, or the NDBR, are trying to find a way so that collection of any forest produce does not deplete the natural biodiversity in any way. After all, the concept of Biosphere Reserve is of coexistence without depleting or harming anyone or anything. No wonder that the Bhotias are extremely aware of the biodiversity and the need to protect their environment. They have a history of standing tall as the guardians of these forests. In fact, many people remember the first united call for conservation came from this very region in the form of the Chipko movement. In the early 70s, an ordinary woman called Kaura Devi did an extraordinary thing. When a contractor came to fell a tree, she clung on to it and said that he would have to fell her too. And thus was born Chipko, the movement. The children of these villages never need the classroom curriculum on environment conservation. In this land of the Chipko movement, of the unassuming Kaura Devi, it is in their legacy. We were completely mesmerized by the people and the land here. The Nanda Devi peak stands at 7,817 meters, making it the second highest peak in India, after of course the famous Kanchenjunga near Darjeeling. So tough is the climb that till today Nanda Devi is considered one of the most difficult peaks to scale. We witnessed the Rishi Ganga river emerging from the snows of Nanda Devi, making its way to the valley below, nourishing all life forms on its way. The river forms and supports a complex ecosystem of myriad life forms, each dependent on one another. We had read about the world having first heard of Nanda Devi in 1934, when English mountaineers Eric Shipton and Bill Tillman wrote about it. They had accomplished a rare feat. They had forced a route into the inner recesses of this region. In 1939, it was declared a wildlife sanctuary. Our friendly liaison person from the NDBR informed us that as an immediate effect, several people started entering the core zone of the sanctuary, from mountaineers to trekkers and from naturalists to poachers. As a result, a blanket ban was imposed on entering this region. By early 80s, this region was conferred the status of a national park. And in January 1988, taking a cue from the UNESCO's Man in the Biosphere program, Nanda Devi National Park was given the status of Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve. India's second and the first in the Himalayas. We were informed that the total area of the Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve is over 640,000 hectares. Out of this, the uninhabited core zone comprises more than 71,000 hectares, while the buffer zone is about 515,000 hectares. The transition area is about 55,000 hectares. It was getting dark. We returned satisfied to our base. But we hadn't heard from one of our units. We were worried. They had gone up to the Rupkund region at an altitude of more than 16,000 feet. The weather was getting murkier. In the morning, our unit returned, dead tired though. They had got caught in a blizzard in the Rupkund region. This snowstorm was unpredicted, like almost all of them. Miraculously, they all returned safe and sound. And all thanks to our guide, who managed to find a way in the most difficult conditions. The Rupkund region is a mystery lake. According to local legend, it has always been treacherous. There is little reason to doubt local belief. The shoreline of this lake is littered with skeleton remains. It is believed that these remains are those who lost their lives here while on a pilgrimage, perhaps in a natural disaster, or maybe an epidemic. Who knows? According to some researchers, these remains are more than 1200 years old. We had spent the night at Tolma. We were now on our way to the core area. We reached a small sleepy hamlet of not more than 25 houses. It stood over the tributary of Dholi Ganga. The boundary between this village and the core area is marked by this age-old cedar or deodar tree. There is no human habitation beyond this tree. This ancient tree suddenly acquired a completely different character. It has seen different times, witnessed different generations, obeyed different laws and edicts. But it stands tall as the guardian of the Nanda. As we crossed the border of the prohibited core zone, we were reminded that we were at 14,000 feet. Suddenly, we had the breathtaking panoramic view of the Rishi Ganga before us. The Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve, with its various ecosystems, has more than 1,000 plant species, from wild edibles to life-saving herbs. The locals believe that there are some deadly varieties of the plants here as well. We were forewarned that we must come here with a lot of time and patience. And if you have the luck as well, you could sight the rare snow leopard. Well, we had the time, but not the luck. A 15-kilometer trek from the Joshimath Badrinath road took us to the second core zone of the Biosphere Reserve. The snow rarely melts here, even in the hottest month of June. This is the Bhundar Valley. In 1931, an English mountaineer by the name of Frank Smythe discovered it, quite accidentally though, while descending from the Kamet Peak. Almost spontaneously, he named it the Valley of Flowers. It's quite obvious why. Over the years, this Valley of Flowers has undergone several changes. Raising of cattle is completely prohibited here. One cannot take away any plants, roots or bulbs from here. The pressure from tourists and pilgrims is mounting, but the local youth has been extremely active here. Along with the Department of Forest, they've managed to keep this region clean. On the way now to the Lata Khadak, we spend the night at a shack of the Forest Department. It was the month of June, and it was time for sheep grazing in the alpine region. But interestingly, these women were collecting allium or jambu, an aromatic herb used in almost every Pahadi kitchen. They would collect it, hand roll it, and dry the wild allium. There was a time when only wild jambu was collected and sold, but today almost every village here cultivates it. The authorities of the NDBR were concerned about the indiscriminate collection of wild jambu. So, in that sense, they've been fairly successful. However, peculiarly, every attempt to cultivate jambu outside the NDBR region has been unsuccessful. Traditionally, agriculture has not been an important part of the local economy. But slowly, things are changing. New technologies are being adopted. Cash crops are being cultivated. Shahajira, Kut, Hathjadi, and Choru have become immensely popular. Before the foundation of the Biosphere Reserve here, these crops were being collected. Today, almost every household grows Shahajira. One of the most amazing things that we witnessed here was that biodiversity is not just an academic term. The awareness level of people here is very high. The Bhotias had been a trading community. They would trade with Tibet via the Niti and the Mana passes. There is an old saying in these parts. They who walked these mountains knew the secrets of keeping the ecological balance. They gave back to the nature from one hand what they took from the other. The balance was perfect. Man and the environment were in harmony. Somewhere, greed set in. This fragile chain of give and take was broken. Today, the NDBR is trying to restore this balance. Traditionally, women have been playing an equal and decisive role in this society. From household chores to working in the fields, they have been at the forefront. We weren't surprised when we found out that women have organized themselves into self-help groups and Mahila Mangal Dals to address several issues. From supplementing family incomes to raising awareness levels, the women here have been more than active. We met up with Gaura Devi's friend. She misses Gaura Devi, but it seems as though she has picked up the mantle. She's all fired up and works tirelessly. She embodies empowerment.
आज जंगलात में जंगलात वाले तो रोड में है, जो जहाँ पर जंगलों के नुकसान हो रहे हैं वहाँ पर कोई नहीं है.
One of the genuine concerns amongst villagers is that while the Biosphere Reserve should be committed to prosperity of both the environment and the people, there is a feeling that people are being neglected.
पहले इतना टूरिस्ट यहाँ पे था कि और इतना पैसा लोगों के पास था, उनके खेत किराए पे थे, उनके घर किराए पे थे, खुद वो एज ए ठेकेदार और एक बहुत अच्छा मित्र विदेशियों का हुआ करता था। विशेषकर विदेशी यहाँ पर आते थे और पीढ़ी दर पीढ़ी मतलब तब से जब से ये मुझे लग रहा 72-73 से तो इतना बाढ़ सा आ गया था कि बहुत ज़्यादा लोग एक्सपीडिशन के लिए यहाँ आए, क्योंकि एक कहेंगे इसको नंदा देवी नेशनल पार्क तो नाम रख दिया, तो ये तो एक वैली ऑफ माउंटेन्स है या हिमालय है, जिसमें सारे बड़े बड़े पीक्स एक ही वैली में है। उनका एंट्रेंस उसी वैली से, और उसी वैली को कोर जोन बनाकर बंद कर दिया। तो सारा पैसा तो हम लोगों का बंद हो गया, कुछ अर्निंग का कोई साधन नहीं रहा। फिर खेती में वाइल्ड लाइफ में साफ कर दिया, जो खेती जरा सा एक हमारा वो था पीछे से सपोर्टर अर्निंग का, वो भी वाइल्ड लाइफ ने डिस्टर्ब कर दिया। तो हमारी पोजीशन इस टाइम ये है कि एक दलिद्र से भी ज़्यादा, मतलब भिखमंगे से हो गए।
One of the grounds is about the blanket ban on mountaineering. This came into effect in 1982. Old-timers here remember those times. We heard tales of their fond memories of European mountaineers who would come here, hire porters and guides. It meant employment and a fair amount of economic growth of the region. Maybe the advocates of ecotourism and controlled mountaineering do have a valid point.
यहाँ भेड़ बकरी रह नहीं गया, भेड़ बकरी तब रहेंगे जब हमारे पास ज़मीन होगी। ऊपर बुग्याल नंदा देवी राष्ट्रीय पार्क हो गया, नीचे राजाजी नेशनल पार्क हो गया, कॉर्पोरेट नेशनल पार्क हो गया। इधर से ये मैं ये भी कहना चाहूँगा कि परंपरा से पीढ़ी दर पीढ़ियों से वनवासियों ने इन वनों को पाला है, वन्य जीवों के साथ रहे हैं, और आज उनको वन बेरी बता करके और इनको कह रहे हैं कि संरक्षित किया जाए। तो सीधी सी बात यह है कि जैव विविधता की जहां बात आ रही, क्या हम जैव विविधता में नहीं आते हैं?
We met up with the manager of the reserve area. He took us to the carding center that has been set up for the people. People here rear sheep for wool. They need a carding center, close and easily accessible. Earlier, the nearest carding center used to be at Chamoli, almost 60 kilometers away. One of the facts that we noticed was that the number of sheep here have dwindled. It's fairly obvious that strict laws of the Biosphere Reserve discourage grazing in several regions. As a result, there is never enough raw wool for carding. The wool for this center is taken to Malari for washing. The small sleepy village of Malari is the local depot where all wool comes from the carding center for washing. The traditional art of carpet weaving is an important activity here. It's a quaint experience to see veteran fingers guiding the younger ones. Malari happens to be the last Indian village in this region. And if one looks at the climate and the topography, you feel like you're already in Tibet. It was time to just sit back and relax. The reserve authorities have done quite a few remarkable things to make the people believe in their efforts. A number of plans have been made. For instance, youngsters get seasonal employment under these plans. Several other training and capacity building activities are undertaken to impart skills to the women here. More importantly, bridges of communication have been built. Village communities discuss among themselves and also with the reserve authorities about issues pertaining to development. The G.B. Pant Institute of Himalayan Environment and Development is an autonomous body of the Ministry of Environment and Forests. It carries out scientific and active research in the villages of the buffer zone. Scientists here believe that the terrain here is so difficult and the area so large that they are not equipped to restore the balance between exploitation and restoration. Also, several issues lead to people-policy conflict. The institute analyzes these and comes up with possible options of conflict resolutions. This is important in designing strategies for sustainable development of the people and the reserve.
We found that ecotourism is one of the potential options for biodiversity conservation as well as socio-economic development of the people. And we suggested that time that if the people they cannot go in the core zone, but we have the beautiful peaks in the buffer zone where if we develop proper route and pathway, then expedition can also be promoted in the buffer zone area to improve the socio-economic conditions of the people living in the buffer zone area.
This was our last day here. We had experienced a peculiar feeling here. The mountains don't merely surround the people here. They are an integral part of life, merging completely in their existence. Many years ago, a famous mountaineer called William Soel was so enamored by this Himalayan peak that he named his daughter Nanda. When Nanda Unsoeld was 22, she tried to scale this very summit and in the effort lost her life close to its summit. One of the last few entries in her diary reads, "I stand upon a wind-swept ridge at night with the stars bright above, and I am no longer alone. But I waver and merge with all the shadows that surround me. I am part of the whole and am content."